the Surrey side.
And certainly Cambridge had a very dirty first stroke on their bow side, which won't have helped them. They're very dependent on a fast start, and it looks to me as though Oxford got away much cleaner in the first few strokes.
And there's absolutely no danger of them clashing at the moment. A huge body of water between them. Both coxes seem to be, choosing completely different lines, one to the other. So there's no danger of, at the moment, last year's event, of that clash happening again.
Well, both being at St Paul's School, both have great experience of this river. Both believe they know where the best water is, but Oxford with a clear advantage.
Certainly part of the psychology for Cambridge taking the Middlesex station was they believed they would at least take the lead immediately off the start. And in practice, they've been going for very fast starts. And I think it's fair to say that they missed that opportunity today.
I think you called it absolutely right. I think they made a mistake on that first stroke, and because the tide is running underneath the boat from stern to bow on the state boat, it's very difficult to get that first one right. And also they had their arm up at the start to say they weren't ready, but the umpire's, I think, within his rights just to say let's get on with it.
Second year running, of course, it's the bow side of Cambridge causing a problem. It's the bowman last year, you'll recall, who lost his blade. But Oxford, you have to say, looking very smooth. They're very comfortable at the start here. Understandably so, it makes such a difference when you see yourself in the lead. It'll work for Rick Dunn to do.
They'll certainly be very happy approaching the first Fulham bend with a third-length lead, because that's more or less the maximum that Cambridge can affect to get out of them. But Cambridge at the moment are struggling. I mean, they're nearly 2/3, 3/4 of a length down. Off the start, Cambridge rated 51, which is where they'd been before, but they were not getting propulsion from the boat at that speed. And if anything, Oxford are moving away from them.
Cambridge off at 51, Oxford at 45, but the cleaner stroke is what counted.
I think the Oxford cox will be telling them, exactly how well they've done. A very, very good start, very clean to get out into a lead. They must be, half a length up and moving very nicely.
That's Fulham Football Ground on the right there, and it's the point of the Middlesex bend, and Cambridge are taking advantage of that, and the crew's getting much closer together because Cambridge want to hold Oxford out as long as they can before making the turn.
There's no doubt that Cambridge tried to put pressure on them here. They know this is the part of the bend where they've got to get back on terms, and indeed they've obviously made a big effort. Probably one must ask whether it's a very considerable effort for this early stage of the race, because they picked up half a length in the last 20 strokes. It was a very significant change in pace from Cambridge, who are now level as they come away from the Fulham Football Ground and move towards the milepost, which is the first timing point for this race.
And close contest in prospect here. Let me just correct those two rates. They were exactly the other way around from what we were initially given. It was Oxford who were off at the higher rate and gained the advantage, which Cambridge have now nullified.
There's a lovely bit of coxing by Cambridge just on that Fulham bend. They squashed over right next to Oxford, held the Oxford cox wide, waited for the warning, and just at the moment they were warned, they kind of jinked away, and that really, they look like they're coming back together again now, but that worked really nicely for Cambridge just at the Fulham Football Ground turn.
Yeah, it was a very good turn. Now Oxford are being warned for crowding Cambridge. Cambridge at a steady 34. Now that's the expected cruise rate for them. Oxford too at around 34, which is perhaps a little lower than we expected, but we'll find out a bit later down the course how much effort Cambridge had to make to get on terms in this rather critical first to second minute.
Coming up, Crabtree Reach.
And Cambridge, keep on that line.
And the first time at the mile post, 3:38 for Cambridge. The record is 3:31 to the mile post.
So I don't think we'll see records today, because you need a helpful breeze to achieve that, as well as a good current. But Cambridge will try and press Oxford as far over to the Surrey bend as they can at this point. They really want to come towards Harrods, which is the next big landmark, at least 3/4 of a length up, because they're going to then face a 1-length deficit as they go round the big Surrey bend.
Key point for the Oxford boat here, Matt.
Well, they're in a good position. I mean, they just weren't. They were in a great position 2 minutes ago, half a length or even 3/4 of a length up. Now that advantage is gone, but the big thing in their favour that's still to come is the Surrey bend. They've really got to hang on in here, keep it within half a length and use the bend just as Cambridge used their bend, but it looks pretty ominous. Cambridge seem to be holding their speed quite comfortably out in front.
They do, but they're pushing. Now they're pulling apart, and that of course means rudder, and rudder is brakes. It slows the boat down. They certainly pull them apart, but Cambridge are holding on to about, what, half to 2/5 of a length, I think, about this stage. It's not much more than half.
That's the Harrods Depository. We just passed the expensive Harrods Village on the Surrey side. Which remind you, as you look at that, it's Cambridge on the Middlesex to the right, Oxford on the Surrey to the left.
And Oxford, I think, beginning to make a move now. They're putting pressure on. This is the classic place for pressure to be applied, because the big significant advantage to the Surrey bend is between here, really, and St Paul's, perhaps a minute beyond the Harrods Bridge. They have the Hammersmith Bridge.
There is Hammersmith Bridge, and the crown of the bend. As you said, Chris, that's where the advantage is greatest, and they will pass St Paul's School, where we understand both coxes are going to get support from the girls and the boys respectively.
Well, I think now the pressure is going to turn back on Cambridge, and Cambridge have got to survive the next 3 minutes. They've got to try and stay as close to level as they can as they come around the next bend.
Pete Hackworth calling for a push here, screaming at his crew. And they are close together and close in terms of battling for the leadership.
And Oxford move on the bend.
Still the advantage with Cambridge, who have to hang on around this bend. If they can keep that advantage, then they will do what ISIS did in the race that ISIS just won. What about the length of stroke? Matt Smith still holding Oxford well, Matt?
No, I think both stroke men are doing a good job. I remember when we raced in our club boat, we raced against Oxford and put them into this kind of position. We put them half or 3/4 of a length down, and they were really, really tenacious. They hung right in there. Their rhythm seemed fairly durable, but the problem is they don't seem to have enough speed to get ahead. They're on the inside of the bend here. I would, from the Oxford camp, I'd like to see them closing up and taking the lead here. I mean, time's beginning to run out for their corner. If they're going to win this race, you'd want them up and clear by Barnes Bridge, and on this form, they don't look to be able to do that.
Not quite the power from the meat wagon, as they've called it, 6, 5 and 4 in the Oxford boat.
Cambridge is certainly crowding them here. I think Cambridge's technique is really perhaps coming into its own now. I saw Oxford make a big effort actually as they came through Hammersmith Bridge, and they raised the rate of striking up a bit, a couple of more strokes a minute. But Cambridge is still holding them, but also they're crowding them. They're trying to push close to that bend as they can, so that they can get the advantage as they sweep round into the next straight. Now, Cambridge still have their nose ahead, which is a considerable achievement for them.
Apart from anything else, you've got to take your hats off, because these guys have now been rowing side by side for getting on for, what, 9 minutes now? And the physical stress that they're under is absolutely amazing. I mean, they've sprinted for the first 2.5 minutes of the race, settled into some kind of pace to take them over the middle part of the course, and everything that either crew has done has been matched by the other. I mean, we've got an absolute classic boat race, and that makes it very, very painful for the guys in the boats.
And
Cambridge, of course, having given the opposition quite a start.
There's no
their
doubt
own ragged start.
I think that will be quite controversial when we come to review the race, but there's no doubt at the moment that Cambridge have just held the nose as they come down this stretch. They're now coming into a head breeze, which is actually they're going to feel as well. But Cambridge responded, I think, to Oxford's push on that last part of the Surrey bend. Now the river is more or less straight for the next 2 to 3 minutes.
Then, of course, the advantage will be with Cambridge after that straight run.
I think it will be about another 2 minutes before Cambridge will start to set the beginning of a bend that's going to turn their way. They must be feeling quite confident. There's no doubt in the back of my mind, if I was in Surrey on this situation, I'd be a bit concerned. I don't know, what would you feel about that, Matt?
No, I mean, I think hats off to Cambridge. They chose this station and have rowed it to perfection. Okay, you'd never choose the start that they had, but from the Fulham football ground right the way around this corner, they've done absolutely brilliantly. They've held on. The rhythm looks very solid, and you know, Rick Dunn there at stroke, you know, is a world champion stroke man, and he's doing a tremendous job for them, keeping them ahead. And as you say, I'm sure the balance of power is shifting in the race now. that you can see on the map there that the advantage is about to run out for Oxford, and they need to seize this chance if they're going to win. And for Cambridge, they know that from Barnesbridge home, it's there on the inside.
And again, there's more contest as they come onto this corner. Oxford now being warned for pressing on Cambridge. Cambridge, I've just taken their straight rate at 32, which is low, which means one of two things. They're resting or they're tired or a bit of both. Because now they're coming past the Chiswick steps and it'll be on to the next bend, which will very much favour Cambridge in the next minute and a half.
Saw the flag go down there. The experience in the Cambridge crew of 6 internationals as opposed to 3 from Oxford, and the more experienced in terms of age as well. It's a test for what Steve Royal calls his young lions of Oxford. Average age of 21 years and 8 months.
As Matt said earlier, Rick Dunn is now a world-class stroke. He's stroked an extremely good straight four, like Oxford's four last year, to take the World Championships. He's a good man to have in what is actually a very stressful situation today.
And I think for the two stroke men, Rick Dunn has a nice, see, he's half a length up, he can see what Oxford are doing, whereas for the Oxford stroke man, he's out the back of the race. It's very difficult for him to feel the differences that he's making and feel the differences in rhythm. And if the Cox is asking for a bit of an effort, you put it in and you don't see any result, then it can be really detrimental to your kind of will to win.
Cambridge just put in a big spurt there. They pushed up to 37. Oxford trying to respond. Cox is being warned again. There's no doubt that this critical bit, as you look now at the map, you can see that bend turning towards Barnesbridge. This is going to give significant advantage to the Cambridge crew now in the next minute and a half.
But again, as was the case under this umpire 2 years ago, it's close as they come to the crossing to the bandstand. And let's hear a word from Gary Herbert.
Now Peter Hackworth has really got a big job on here, the Oxford Cox. Round the outside of the bend, really all in from here. Cambridge just have to sit nice and relaxed. It's a big job from both Coxes doing very well. I'm watching them and they're really hitting the rudder quite hard. Every time they're warned, whoever's been warned, they're just hitting the rudder just a little bit too hard, and that's taking the run off the boat. But at the moment, they're both doing very well. But Oxford really just hanging in there. And I think at the moment, it's just down to Peter Hackworth.
Oxford have had a reputation for pugnacity and tenacity. They're needing both at the moment while still maintaining a rhythm to compete.
Absolutely. I mentioned it before. They were absolutely brilliant in the race against Leander 2 weeks ago, and it's the same qualities that they're showing here. The odds are stacked against them now. They're down. There's only a corner to Cambridge's favour from here on in, and yet Oxford show no sign of wanting to give up this race to Cambridge.
At the moment, Oxford are overrating Cambridge. They're taking 3 or 4 strokes a minute more. They're really not going to be prepared to give up. Now, one of the challenges here, the umpire's got to get these two crews through, but the central arch really level. Now, this hasn't been seen for a long time. It's a very difficult bridge to steer because the bridge is offset. It's an angle across the river.
And it's a very narrow span in the middle. You can see the two buttresses there. There's not a lot of room for the two boats to get through.
And my impression is that Oxford have really closed up. There's not much between them at the moment.
Well, just as Cambridge rowed brilliantly round the outside of the Surrey bend, Oxford are rowing brilliantly on the outside of the beginning of this last Middlesex bend.
I think the next minute through this bridge could be absolutely critical. If Cambridge can steer this well, they may just steal back another half a length or so as they come through that arch, because a lot of rudder will have to be applied by the crew on the outside, which is Oxford.
And they've been rowing now for a little over 3 1/4 miles. It's very, very tight indeed. Cambridge thought perhaps that it was won, but Oxford now trying to come around from the Surrey side at the finish, and that is not often done. Funnily enough, Oxford did it 50 years ago with Chris Davies as their stroke, came around the outside of the Surrey bend to take the victory by a canvas. And the times at Barnesbridge.
All those hours of training and all those hours in the gym, and now it comes down to a 3-minute sprint to Chiswick Bridge. And
look at Cambridge. There's some real trouble on stroke side there. There's some blades waving around there. I don't think they look at all good there. They don't look great to me. I think, look at the 4 blade there. Look at 4. It's not good. That's on the left-hand side. The second blade in the front. It's not going in firmly.
4 man is Sebastian Meyer, the sculler, who's had to adopt to a different discipline.
It's still here for the grabs, there's no doubt about that. Cambridge have been labouring at 32-33. I'm not sure they can find much of a change of pace. This is really the end of their bend now, and from here on inwards it's more or less a straight sprint. You know.
This is very reminiscent for me of that race, what, nearly 20 years ago, when it came down to 6 foot with one of them. Oxford men really struggling physically. I think something happening in the Cambridge boat where he's absolutely spent. He's hardly going in time.
There's nothing happened there at all, is there? Soon after Barnes Bridge, but they've got, what, about a minute and a half to 2 minutes from here, I suppose, and it's virtually straight. You can see Chiswick Bridge in the back of the picture. That's where they're going for, and I think Oxford are beginning to come past them.
And that shows how close it was to the timings at Barnes Bridge. And it's one of the great races of all time here. There have been stories in the past of a member of the crew, as it were, in quotes, dying because of the demands of the race. Just look how close this is. And Oxford may well be inching in front. Round the outside on the Surrey bend.
Absolutely superb effort from both crews. You just cannot imagine how tired they are now. They've trained for 6 months for this and it's gone all the way. It's an absolutely brilliant race, and to have it come down to what it's going to be, the third of a length between them, is true testament to both these crews.
Yeah, both these crews were very confident going into this race. They both believed in their ability, and it still could go any way here. They're almost on top of each other again, but the Cambridge, I think, are really struggling.
He's very nearly stopped.
Still 250 yards to go, and the 7 oarsmen almost of Cambridge just trying to hang on to the advantage, but Oxford are coming through. Oxford are in the lead as they come towards the finishing line. The flotilla following. Oxford are going to win the boat race, and they get the victory of 2002. What happened in the Cambridge boat, what a magnificent row by Oxford. It's historic again, as it was 50 years ago.
Absolutely superb. I'm sure they were just down at Barnes Bridge, so that puts them into there's 2 crews in the last century that have come through from Barnes Bridge to win, and both crews rode brilliantly when they were disadvantaged. You know, Cambridge rode brilliantly in that middle part of the race when they were out on the outside of that Surrey bend, and you're beginning to think, well, we were talking about it, beginning to think, well, the advantage is swinging to them, they're going to win this race. And then just when it looked all over for Oxford, they seemed to find a little bit more, and round that last Middlesex bend, there was all sorts of things going on.
Well, as we discussed earlier in the race, that huge change of pace Cambridge had to use within a minute of the start may have been what cost them later on in the race, because you can't do that lightly in a race of this distance. And I do think Oxford rode superbly well from Barnes End, because it's very difficult to come around that bend on the outside.
Well, I mean, this is the place of the agony and the ecstasy, but in both cases today, this is the place of total exhaustion. The ISIS crew waiting to applaud the victorious blue